Hello, you can make a podcast more enhanced by adding images to your podcast track. You can find the images that you want in your media browser, or you can add images from your iPhoto library. To begin, in the track area, if you do not see the podcast track, go to the menu, the track menu at the top, click on it, and find Show Podcast Track. It appears above the male voice track. Click on it again, it turns purple. This is when you know that you can add now images to this track. Alright. Next you will want to go to the media browser and select images that you want to put on this podcast track. You can add one image at a time, or you can add a group of images to the podcast track. I will show you how to add a group of images to this podcast track. I found the area that I want. I click on it, shift key down, and I select. I now drag this group of images to the podcast track next to my play header. They now appear in two areas, in the podcast track area as well as the podcast markers and artwork area. Alright, now I'm ready to show you how you can resize these tracks by clicking here. By clicking here between the images, you can lengthen or shorten its duration. You can also move the images by clicking on it and moving from side to side, left to right. You can also space them out to fit according to where you want them to appear on a vocal or a musical episode of your podcast. I will show you now how to add a single photo to this track. For example, I want to add this photo. I will click on it and drag it over here to the episode artwork. This thumbnail now appears here and also up here. Okay? If you notice, I'm going to drag one more time over here to the artwork area because I want to show you how to edit this. I want to show you how to edit this track, this photo. Notice the photo has a problem. The head, you do not see the lady's face, the young girl's face. So I want to edit this face so I can make it, so I can have a better presentation. I have two ways of doing this. I can double click here. It brings a thumbnail up in the editor, artwork editor. Or I can double click over here. It does the same thing, brings up the artwork editor again. I can now click on the picture and reposition it by dragging on it. If I want a little larger close-up, I now move the slider. I can now drag on it again, position it some more. If I like what I see, I now say set. It now appears here and here as thumbnails, alright? A thumbnail of the image. Okay, now if I don't want this image here, I click on it and I deselect it. And it's gone from both areas, artwork area and also from the podcast track area. Now, next thing I want to do is, if I want to add chapter titles to my images, I would now come in the chapter title areas, click on the chapter titles, and I will give each image a name. Alright, you notice that each group I've labeled each one of the chapter titles. And you notice every time I label one, a little small diamond appeared next to the names. Alright, here's what I have done. I've given these images chapter titles that can appear on my podcast, whether it's vocal or instrumental. I could spread them out to fit wherever I want them to fit along the podcast episode. All right. If a viewer is using his iTunes or iPod, if he wishes to skip to an episode, he can click on any one of these chapter titles and jump ahead to whatever he wants to find, or jump back to whatever he wants to review without having to stroll through the whole or listen to the whole episode. He can just skip around to find what he wants. Okay. Now, for example, I can also take and add music to this track by going to my loop browser. I can find a piece of music that I would like to put in here, and by clicking on dragging over, I drag it into my area, and then I position it. I can lengthen it to fit across my tracks. I can then come back up here to my tracks, my podcast track, and I can move the images around where I want the images to appear within my podcast track. All right. Now, I want you to be mindful of one other thing, is that you can put images within your podcast track, or you can put movies in your podcast track, but you cannot have movies and images at the same time. You can have either one or the other, but you can't have both. All right. Editing with the podcast is very easy to do. It all requires you taking your time, finding what you want to do, selecting the image you want to put in there, and then position them into the place where you want them to be at, and adding your chapter titles. And that's all it is to doing a simple enhancement of your podcasts using images and videos. I'm going to leave you now with a little example. Also, you can, if you want to see how the pictures flow through your pictures, click on this image here, and as you begin to play your music or your vocal recording, you'll see the images begin to appear within the preview window.